All right, let's go. This is the Early Bird Awesemo.com podcast. Glad to be with you, Dave Lochran and Adam Shaw. I believe the first one I've hosted since we've done the crossover here. Filling in for, Adam filling in for Dan Stratford, who, what's he have, a chipped wisdom tooth that's messing with his tongue when he goes to talk or so.
Yes. Something about he can't talk because his tooth's like cutting off his tongue. I don't know. It sounded like a really weird issue.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds painful, and I had
Yeah.
both of my top wisdom teeth extracted when like 2 years ago, not when I was younger. It's not fun when they hurt, but
No, no.
I've never heard of like a jagged tongue cutting tooth. But you know what? I'm not calling you a liar, Dan. Anyway, 7 games on Friday, Adam. 7 games. So not exactly the deepest Friday slate, but this is my wheelhouse. I like the 6 to 8 gamers.
Yeah, absolutely. The 11 game, you just start getting into those, there's so many punts. Like there's going to be guys that put up 30. 7 and 8, it's like you have a nice mix of good plays, and it's not completely unreasonable to expect there not to be a total fluke game.
Yeah, pretty much. And we've had a few of them to start the year. I mean, look, basketball's changed, and you're going to get a lot of those games. We're going to go position by position instead of game by game. We already do enough game by game during the day, and I think the podcast is better suited foundationally to get you started from a position by position standpoint. Let's just go ahead and kick it off at the point guard position. Again, 7 games, and when you're looking at the totals, you have you have 3 games with a 234 point or higher total. That's Minnesota, Milwaukee, New Orleans, Brooklyn, Sacramento, Washington. In order from lowest to highest: 234, 236 and a half, 237 and a half. And then
Four
you
of
have,
those teams are teams that they don't even feel like fast-paced teams when you say their name. Like
I
Milwaukee,
know,
Minnesota, Washington, Sacramento.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's,
2018 NBA it's going to be fun.
yeah, it's insane already. And then you have 3 games, mind you, there's only 7, so 3 above 234 and 3 more below 230 but above 226. Toronto, Dallas is 226. Charlotte, Chicago is 227, and Knicks hosting Golden State 229 and a half. Interestingly, the lowest total game on the slate is Houston and the Clippers at 217 and a half.
Yeah, that's pretty surprising. Dallas and Toronto at 226.
Yep. Yep. 226. Charlotte's playing in a 227 game. I know their pace has crept up over the past year, but it's really something, man. Like Sacramento, Washington is the highest total, 237 and a half. It wasn't more than 4 years ago that a 210 total was like, damn, that's high.
Oh yeah, I mean when I started playing NBA DFS was 2014 or 2015, and if you got like a 220, I remember the Rockets like Lakers games would be like 225, and
Yeah,
it would be the highest projected total by like 15 points.
easily. Yeah. And then like Phoenix, Golden State, those ones, it's insane. And you just started seeing the pace creep higher and higher, and now it's just another It's in the stratosphere, dude. It's crazy. To have 7 games, only one of them is below 226. Like, will we see an over/under below 200 this year?
I can't imagine because the slow teams are playing like it's not just that the fast teams got faster; it's that the teams like Memphis and Sacramento, stop playing Zach Randolph, and that
Right.
that increases their total by 10 right there.
I think Memphis, Utah was at 215 earlier this
Yeah,
year.
I mean, and it smashed the under to be fair, but
Right.
yeah, I think it was like 219 because we were all just like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, it's crazy. And the other day I was tracking, I think it was the 11 gamer, and like 9 of 11 came under the total. But still, like, you're just seeing these monster totals. There might be an edge there from a betting standpoint. We should really dig into that more because um, despite the pace changing, it is insane to see how high these totals have been. But anyway, let's just go ahead, start a point guard. And before we do, any injuries, I've looked it over, but there may be something I've missed that you think is more notable than I do. Any injuries here that you see as noteworthy outside of guys that are probable, which means they're going to play?
James Harden.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, James. I was thinking like legit questionable or doubtful
Oh,
guys.
okay, yeah, yeah.
But no. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I'm glad you because that happened. That happened yesterday. So I guess I put it out of my head. But yeah, grade 1 hamstring sprain. Going to be out for at least a week. So that is big. That's
Yeah.
absolutely big. And
JJ Barea questionable. I think that could obviously impact the Dallas backcourt.
yeah, and that's Dennis Smith is probable. I was hoping that maybe both of those guys would be out. Then you could definitely get into some interesting.
Yeah. Also, DeLon Wright missed practice. It's been weird with the Van Vliet and DeLon Wright. Like one of them plays, one of them doesn't. Yesterday Van Vliet missed and Wright played, but then today being Thursday, Wright missed practice, Van Vliet practiced. So I don't know. I guess one of them could end up sitting again.
Yeah, well, we'll track it throughout the day. Of course, you and I have the deep dive at 5 o'clock. Definitely, if you want to tune in for and what I think are the best game breakdowns that you can find and in-depth analysis, then you want to tune into the deeper dive with Adam and myself because we're going to give you that hard hitting stuff each and every day. Okay, point guard. Let's kick it off, man. What do you got?
Chris Paul. Obviously, I just think that's where it has to start, facing his former team without James Harden. Obviously, going to see a bunch more usage, going to see more assist opportunities, and he already was getting a ton of assist opportunities early on this season at least. So he is at least priced up somewhat on DraftKings to 9,200, but I still think that's a pretty cheap price tag for him in this spot without James Harden. So obviously starts there. John Wall against this bad Sacramento team. We talk about him a lot, having a really high floor and not as high of a ceiling as other guys around him. But I think that the price tag is pretty fair at 8,500. Steph obviously is Steph. He can always go nuts. And then Kemba, I still love him against the Chicago team. He just faced them. Now he gets them at home. We're seeing monster usage from him this season, up over 30%, over 30% expected assist percentage as well, just absolutely carrying this offense and playing about 38 minutes a game while he does it.
Yeah. Steph Curry, I can assure you that by Friday morning, there will be someone mentioning the Steph Curry Madison Square Garden narrative. I can assure you of that.
What narrative is that?
That when he plays it at MSG, he has monster games. The funny thing is, I think it was only 2, but people tend to stick with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I knew there was a LeBron MSG. I didn't know there was a Curry one too.
Yeah, I can look it up. Let's see, because it was just a monster game. And now, and then he had, I think, one more. Let's see, where is it? Points. He had a 54-pointer at Madison Square Garden. That was right before he had a triple-doubled. Yeah, so I'm telling you, people will mention it, even though there's really not much to it. But yeah, it was the 50. Go ahead.
I assume he'll be kind of popular anyway, just because of what he did to the Wizards his last game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been filthy. He had 11 threes in that 54.
In 3 quarters. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was actually talking about the Madison Square Garden game. Which,
I was talking about his last game.
Right, which is funny because he hit 11 threes in that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been filthy good. We'll get to Giannis shortly, who has a mouth-watering matchup. I don't know who's going to stop him. We saw, like, you know what? We'll wait and get into that because I think we can spend a decent amount of time there. But yeah, John Wall's price coming down, highest total game of the night. That is a decent play, especially now that Curry's price has come up too. How much more do you like Chris Paul over, say, John Wall or Kemba or I'll throw Lowry in there, dude. Lowry's been pretty solid himself. I mean, the assist, double-digit assists in 3 straight, and you're seeing him work, coexisting very nicely with Kawhi Leonard. Not a ton of points, but very consistent. So a lot of these point guards at the high 7K range up to that 9.2 range where Chris Paul tops it out are in good spots and have been very good to start the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're obviously all in good spots, but Chris Paul still just takes the cake for me. I just got his numbers up. Since in the regular season, since the start of last year, he's played 890 minutes without James Harden on the floor, 31.4% usage rate, 56% assist percentage. He's averaged 1.66 DraftKings points per minute. So, I mean, just like real quick, back of the envelope math, if he's going to play, let's say, 36 minutes, that's like 60 fantasy points, and that's without accounting for, matchup or anything else. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to get away from Paul, at least in cash games. If he's someone certainly to pay attention to in tournaments, if his ownership is going to be, like astronomical, there are plenty of pivots. But just in terms of projection, I can't imagine him not being my number one point guard.
Yeah, it's just very difficult to ever overlook Chris Paul when James Harden isn't on the court. James Harden's a usage monster. You take him off and there really isn't that much else. I mean, you have Eric Gordon, who's going to get some shots up. You have Melo, who is nothing at this point. Clint Capella, anything he produces will probably be facilitated by Chris Paul. I mean, they really don't have all that much. So I'm with you there. It's a phenomenal play. I do still think Lowry below 8K is a solid option. Like he consistently churns out solid numbers. And unlike a Zach LaVine, who, I like, Lowry has a higher floor because Lowry could score 12 points and still give you 45 fantasy points. And that's something I really, really like. What are your thoughts on De'Aaron Fox? Because he is definitely looking so much better than he did in his rookie year. That matchup against Memphis was not easy. Mike Conley is still a very good defender, and he's a defender that has been phenomenal in pick and roll defense for his career whenever he's been healthy. And De'Aaron Fox has been operating heavily, like top 5 out of the pick and roll this season, and still went out there and put up big numbers against Conley and the Grizzlies the other day. Any thoughts on him against Washington in this very, very high total game?
Yeah, I mean, the minutes have been nice, and Sacramento, they have so many young guys coming off the bench that it's tough to trust most guys on their team. But De'Aaron Fox is the exception, him and Buddy Hield both, but especially Fox, because he is one of the young guys that they want to get a bunch of minutes to, and they're perfectly fine just running him into the ground. Not a terrible matchup here. Obviously a fast-paced game, a really, really, nice price tag. The only issue, I guess, would be that he's $100 more than Elfrid Payton in a nice spot against Brooklyn. He's the same price as Luka Doncic against Toronto. So I think that it would be hard to – I think in general this is going to be a slate where it's tough to get, tons of exposure to any one person. Like I'm probably going to end up spreading it out more than usual. But just in that price range, there are a lot of good plays.
Yeah. Why did DraftKings move Doncic back to point guard exclusively? What is this?
Yeah, I don't know. I just noticed that. That makes no sense. Like they finally had it right.
It's so dumb. And the funny thing is neither him or Dennis Smith have multi-position eligibility. It's
right.
Really just stupid.
I can't remember who it was. There was someone last year that literally plays like 6 positions and had one, was not multi-position eligible while you had Steph Curry playing shooting guard.
Yep. Giannis for a while was. I can't remember.
Yeah, that might be who I was thinking of.
I actually like Fox over Doncic in this spot. I think this is a tough spot. He's going to see Kawhi Leonard treatment here, man.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just torn because I'm still waiting for Doncic to just blow up. Like everything, rate-wise says that he should just be having monster games, and we haven't seen one yet. But you're right; it is a much tougher matchup for him than it is for Fox.
Yeah, and I don't think Fox is like a premier play, but I just think he kind of goes overlooked and he's been producing in all areas of the game. Definitely a secondary option for me, but one I don't mind. And you mentioned Peyton as well. Peyton's done great at just being that kind of third wheel. Like he's not trying to do too much, and it's working out great for him. If you can give me 6+ assists, 6+ rebounds, and 10, 15 points a game, that's not bad at that price. It's a deep position once again. I'm sure there's guys that we're missing. Cameron Payne's up to 4,600. You were nice call on the minute projection, by the way. You got right around 30. Who else? Is there anyone else in terms of value that stands out to you? I know Gilgeous-Alexander has a ton of talent. I can't wait to see him finally start to get more run because he has a lot of breakout potential as well. But right now, he's seen 22, 26, 23, 28 minutes, literally been all over the place. And he's been under a fantasy point per minute, but I like the kid's talent. And this team is going to start just feeding into their younger players a lot going forward.
Yeah, a couple of so I expect that Peyton will end up picking up a bunch of ownership now. He was 6% owned last slate. He went off for like 40 fantasy points. Now he's going to be really popular because that's how DFS works. I still think he's a good play for the same reasons I did last time. But you do have Malcolm Brogdon at the same price point in a high total game against Minnesota. Brogdon's playing big minutes. Like, he's probably going to play more minutes than Cameron Payton. It's not like Payton is a super high point per minute guy either. So I don't see any reason in tournaments to favor Payne over Brogdon if we assume that Payne's going to be really popular. And then Pat Beverly, you mentioned Gilgeous-Alexander, but right now they're basically splitting the point guard minutes. And we've seen Beverly not play big minutes in a few games already because the second unit gets hot and Gilgeous-Alexander stays out there. But we're still seeing Beverly play, like 24 minutes through 3 quarters. And he's going to be needed for defensive purposes against Chris Paul in this game. He flirted with a triple-double his last time out. Went for like 38 fantasy points or something. He's still really cheap. I think that he's another very good tournament pivot away from campaign for ownership reasons.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. One guy that I haven't understood and didn't understand the other day. Look, I get things wrong, but Michael Carter Williams, the fact that he was being talked about as a quality value play. I mean, Michael Carter Williams is a very poor shooter. He's a fine rebounder for a point guard, but he's not the point guard when you have Chris Paul or James Harden on the court. I get that he's cheap, and I get that he could start again, but you legitimately have just no upside here whatsoever because he's not a scorer, he's not a shooter, and the only way he's giving you value is if he's running the offense, which isn't happening with Chris Paul or James Harden on the court. I'd have more interest in Carter Williams if he was coming off the bench when one of these guys was out and was going to get 25 minutes as the backup point guard, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, the Rockets didn't even pretend like he was the point guard. I'm pretty sure they listed him as the starting small forward and listed
Harden. Yeah.
Right, and listed Harden as the starting point guard. Yeah.
And Gordon at the 2.
I'm pulling up. He had a 15.6% usage rate in that game. If you want to play that, then go for it. For 21 minutes or something like.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. No interest there. I mean, if I'm going to roll the dice on a punt from Houston, I'd rather just go to Gerald Green, who at least has
shoot.
Yeah, he's capable of getting hot, and he fits perfectly into what the Rockets try and do. We saw that stretch when he first signed with them last year where it was like a match made in heaven with a team just asking him to run down in transition and shoot threes. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to a punt from Houston, I'm going to Gerald Green, not to Michael Carter Williams. Right.
That was a tough one to understand. I'd rather go to a guy that can, when you're running the court transition and – I mean, just in general, when you're jacking up 100 threes a game, MCW is not the guy that you're going to be dishing the ball off to. I can assure you of that. And we saw that. Like Malcolm Brogdon, who you mentioned, I think is a perfectly fine pivot. Not even pivot, but just a value play that I don't have an issue with either. I think that's pretty right now. I don't know if there's anyone else at point guard that makes much sense.
No, I don't really see anyone. No.
Ugh, all right, let's go to shooting guard here. Nicholas Batum, man, he will always let you down. And then when you finally give up, that big game happens. It's just the way he does it. This is not a bad spot for Batum. He's played 42, 36, and 38 minutes over his and I'm just starting in the mid-range because he jumped off the page. He's 5,600. He's played 36, 38, and 42 minutes over his last 3 games. Like, the guy gets monster run every single day and has just done nothing with it. But now he faces like one of the worst defenses in the league. It's so hard for me not to say, okay, fine, Batum, I'll go back to the well. Don't do me dirty. You can't mess this up, but he can.
Yeah, he absolutely can. And you had mentioned it on the show the other day when we were talking about him. The usage is down this year. The assist opportunities are down. Basically, everything's down. And it's actually really frustrating because one of the talking points around this team in the offseason was that Tony Parker, coming over, his very good friend, and they knew that Batum needed to be more aggressive and blah, blah, blah. And now he's just going out there and doing even less than he did in previous years. The price tag's really appealing, but at the same time, I think I'd rather just go a little bit cheaper and hope Jeremy Lamb gets hot. I mean, he's at least someone that goes out there and looks to score, and we
or
know
Gerald Green.
Yeah, and I mean, that Lamb can run into some pretty good rebounding games too. So I don't know. I think I would lean Lamb, assuming he's going to play around 30 minutes. Like I think they're similar plays. Like they're both too cheap for their upside, and they're also both pretty likely to disappoint. But I just think that Lamb is, at $800 cheaper is actually a little bit better.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just I could almost assure you that Batum will go off now. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
no.
It's just how it works.
Yep, he'll have 40 at the end of the first quarter, and you can just turn off your laptop.
Yep, and then hate yourself because you considered playing him all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
But Gerald Green without Harden is interesting. I mean, without Paul, he played 21 and 28 minutes. He didn't do much. But let's also keep in mind that having James Harden off the court is different than Chris Paul. Not much from a facilitating purpose, but because you're taking 20 field goal attempts out of the lineup. And Michael Carter-Williams isn't going to be the one to soak them up. Yes, Eric Gordon will. We know that Chris Paul will, of course. But this is a spot where Gerald Green could play 28 minutes and give you 25, 28 fantasy points for sure. As you mentioned, if it's between him at a cheaper price than Carter Williams, it's not even a question for me.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think this is a really good bounce back spot for Green. If you look at last season, he played 675 minutes without James Harden on the floor. He had a 23.1% usage rate. If you put Chris Paul, on the floor, you get a really slow loading laptop. I assume that it's going to go down, and I guess it's just not going to load for me at all. But so 23.1% usage rate without Harden on the floor, 21% alongside Chris Paul with James Harden off. So you're talking about, plenty of usage there. Obviously, Carmelo Anthony in the mix changes things a little bit, but it's still a really cheap player who's going to play pretty big minutes and just has so much upside that I think it's a pretty nice bounce back spot after a really ugly game against Utah.
And we've seen Gerald Green do it plenty of times in the past as well.
Oh, yeah.
We've just seen it so often. Where are you at on a guy like Damian Dotson? Last time out, he goes out there and drops 42 fantasy points with a 20-10 double-double in 34 minutes. That came against Miami. Now he's facing and that was in a blowout loss, by the way, that frustrated the both of us in terms of Whiteside. Now he's got this Golden State team that plays at a fast pace, but also does a very good job of limiting efficiency. Are you buying into Dotson?
No. There's no way outside of, maybe sprinkling him in some like lineups where I'm max entering. There's no way that I'm making Dotson a core play here at a $4,200 price tag when he was 11% owned last slate because people were chasing what he did the game before. Yep. And then he went out and threw up 42 fantasy points with like half of them coming in the fourth quarter of a 30-point game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not chasing that. If you go and just look at rotations for New York, in the 2 games ago when he played like big minutes, you had Ron Baker split his forehead open after 1 minute, and Dotson subbed in, played a huge stretch. And then in the second half, once they were able to reset and play normal rotations, he played like 12 minutes or something like that. Against Miami, he did sub in before Ron Baker. He subbed in for Trey Burke, which is good if you're looking for reasons to play Dotson. But still, you got like 11 and a half minutes of playing time. And then he picked up another 4 minutes because Frank Ntilikina picked up his second or third foul with 4 minutes to go in the second quarter. So if you take away those minutes, you're looking again at 11 and a half first half minutes. So you can project Dotson for like 22, 23 minutes. I'm seeing him projected already for tomorrow for like 29 minutes. That's not a good projection. I'm not going there. And if other people want to go for it, then I think that is money in my pocket, really.
Yeah, I think the projection, and that's a great point, is more in line with the first game that he played where he saw 22 minutes. Right. Unless, of course, Unless, of course, you have a situation where they say, okay, well, he's been playing well, he's going to get additional run. But if he gets off to a rough start, he's not playing another 28 minutes. So
right, and also like I'm just looking at the Miami game. He picked up even more additional minutes in the second half. Trey Burke got off to a bad start and got pulled after like 2.5 minutes, and Dotson subbed in.
there you go.
I'm not saying that Trey Burke can't have another bad game. I'm just saying that the normal rotation, like the plan, is not for Damian Dotson to sub in 2.5 minutes into a half for Trey Burke.
Essentially, all of the stars aligned in back-to-back games.
Right. And he had ownership, and so it just amplifies it even more that people people made a bad play with Dotson, and then they got rewarded for it, so they think that it was a good play, and that Damian Dotson's like the key to winning DFS right now.
And got rewarded again.
Right.
Yeah, it was like Dorian Finney-Smith the other year. It bothered the hell out of me. Kawhi Leonard, we'll just talk about him here. I loved him last game. He was hard to fit because of so many other good plays, but 35 points, 52 fantasy points. It was a really strong game. I mean, he's operating with monster usage. I love seeing this. The minutes, obviously, you're looking at 35 minutes plus in close games. But again, he's in that price range where, on a slate where you have Giannis and you have Anthony Davis against Brooklyn and Chris Paul, he's a hard player to fit.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's tough because it's a good matchup. The price tag is reasonable, but at the same time, like you said, there's just so many cheaper guys that have high upside, and like I guess on a broader scale, I think it's going to be really hard for me this year to play much of the guys like Kawhi, like in that price range, the guys that they have like a 60-point ceiling, but most of the time they're going to be capped around like 52, 53, and they're around like 9K, because with how fast basketball is now, there's so many, any given slate, there's so many like $7,500, $8,000 players that also can go for 50.
Yeah.
So it's like I want those guys, or I want the guys like Giannis that I think can actually score 100. It's like paying up to get 60 or 65 points in this brand of NBA. I think it's going to end up doing more damage than good for you over the course of the season. Which
is a perfect segue to small forward. Giannis Antetokounmpo, coming off of a monster game. If you're talking MVP race right now, I have him in the lead, and not even just from the first few games, but just heading into the season. This is a guy that I thought has a very good chance of winning it. You still have Anthony Davis, you still have Steph Curry, you still have plenty of other guys, whether it be LeBron, Harden, you name it. But Giannis is just an absolute freak. I mentioned to you during yesterday's show that the rim protection from Embiid doesn't even matter. And they clogged the lane on him in the first quarter, and then in the half court, and then in the second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, he said, screw it. I'm going to take the ball from my own defensive zone, and I'm going to burn every one of you every single time and get to the rim. And when I miss it, I'm going to get my own rebound, the offensive rebound, and put it back in. And I'm going to do it again and again and again. And that's exactly what he did. They forced him into a couple threes. He missed all three of them and still finished with 32 points. Giannis Antetokounmpo cannot be stopped. Jimmy Butler might be a decent defender, but from a size standpoint, he has no chance. Karl Anthony Towns is becoming one of the worst rim protecting bigs in the league. How in the world do you stop Giannis in this spot? You don't.
Yeah, you don't, you can't. And it's not like the athleticism and everything is great, but then you look at the team he plays on and the way he's used. And I'd said it to someone on Twitter the other night when he was torching Philadelphia. The only guy for DFS purposes, when you factor in how talented they are, how they produce, and then the opportunity they have, the only guy that I think even belongs in the same sentence as Giannis is Anthony Davis. And you have Giannis on this Bucks team where there's three players that contribute offensively: him, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe. It's just such like where you have LeBron with all this cast of guys that can take the ball and score.
And in his 17th season, he doesn't care about putting up there. Like, he can defer.
Right,
yeah.
Right. But like Giannis, even if he wanted to defer, who is he going to defer to? There's
right.
just nothing. There's nobody there. Like, it's just so concentrated. I mean, he's going out. I haven't updated it since the game against Philadelphia, but I doubt it decreased much. Going into that game, he had a 40.3% usage rate, which, obviously is absurd, especially when so many of his field goal attempts are going to be in transition and getting to the rim. Then, you and I talked about it. I have him dropping off a bit in terms of expected assist percentage, still to a really high number, just not like, I think from like 33% down to like 24%. But you had a good point too, that it would make sense for his teammates to be more efficient off of his assists, because he does such a good job of drawing defenders to him and getting them open looks, or giving them handoffs under the basket basically for easy baskets. And then the rebounding has been insane, and it makes sense, not only because physically he should be good at rebounding, but look at what Brook Lopez created for guys when he was in Los Angeles. He doesn't care about getting rebounds. He'll box his guy out though, and let, in the Lakers case, Josh Hart. In this case, I think I would assume to some extent it's been Giannis just getting the ball off the glass and then running in transition.
Right. That's it. Seriously, they slowed him down in the first quarter, and then he just found the easiest way to crush him, which is run the court and take 3 strides. It's just ridiculous what he does. Yes, you have Middleton, you have Bledsoe, but these aren't guys that are going to really take away production from you. And a good way to look at it, I mean, Bledsoe has actually produced pretty solid numbers this season. If you look at his fantasy totals, they haven't been bad at all. Middleton hasn't been bad. Actually, Middleton's been good as well. But Giannis is just still smashing, even with Middleton and Bledsoe putting up solid numbers. Like, Middleton and Bledsoe are both averaging right around 40 fantasy points per game.
Yeah, they haven't had bad games, and Giannis hasn't had a good shooting game. Not saying that he's going to do it consistently, but clearly he's going to have some games this year where he actually shoots the ball well, and it's just going to be insane. After yesterday's game, or after the game against the Sixers, he has a 39% usage rate. So, I mean, he dropped off a little bit from 40.5, but 39% usage rate, 23.3 total rebounding percentage, 32.1 assist percentage, which, as I said, I do expect to come down, but still to a very high number. And then he plays huge minutes on top of it. It's just like a perfect storm for Giannis, and I absolutely love him.
Yeah, I don't see how you get away from him here. And just like you factor the matchup in too, it is a good matchup. This Minnesota defense is not good. There's nothing about them that should scare anybody. I think we've said enough on Giannis. And also, Milwaukee's playing at a pretty fast pace, top 10 pace this year as well. So,
I'm really interested to see what I end up with him projected at for this game.
Oh, yeah. It's probably going to be around the 74 you had him at against Philly. I mean, it's got to be around there. We still have to talk about a few other small forwards. We talked about some of them at shooting guard, but anyone that jumps off the page at you, not named Giannis?
I mean, Kevin Durant's obviously really good, but it's just so hard not to find the money for Giannis when Durant's like ceiling is like 60 and Giannis is 100. I want to find $1,600.
Yeah, and Giannis doesn't play alongside Steph Curry either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I guess one injury we forgot to mention, Bobby Portis is out. So I think that makes Jabari Parker a pretty clear, top value.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, so Jabari Parker is 5,500. He's small forward eligible on DraftKings. He's going to play big minutes here. Him and Bobby Portis were basically splitting all of the power forward minutes. So you're going to get a bunch of those going to Parker. He's absolutely sucked, but he's going to go out there. He's going to shoot. And I'll take my chances, especially in cash games. He's a volatile enough player that if you feel the need to pivot in tournaments, then he can certainly bust. But at his price point, I don't think there's a huge need to pivot away. If you did, I think you would do it if you're looking for someone at the same price. I think you go to either Buddy Hield or Carmelo, just because they have that same upside that Parker has, and they're volatile players also. I was expecting you not to mention Melo, but I was going to say I have to mention him whether you want me to or not. 4,900. He played 39. I haven't looked into the rotations yet. I definitely will in preparation for tomorrow's shows, but played 39 minutes. He had played 27, 29, 27. That was in the first game that Paul missed. And then
39 against Utah. Was there any reason you would expect that? Well, actually, hold on a second.
I'm looking now. I don't see one. It looks like
Because Harden played 32. So it's still there's still
yeah. So that Anthony came in for Harden,
right, but that still would only be like an extra 5 minutes. That's what I mean.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think probably 33 or 34 minutes for Anthony is a reasonable projection.
Which is not bad at 4,900 with the team being without their leading scorer. And
guess who subbed out 3.5 minutes into the first quarter after accumulating 0 stats on 1 field goal attempt for Carmelo Anthony?
Michael Carter-Williams.
You're correct.
Yeah. How did I guess? Of course he did. He stinks. The fact that he was air quotes starting at small forward is laughable. Like he's the same size as some small forwards. He just can't do anything that small forwards can do.
He can't do anything that basketball players can do.
Right, exactly. He was the rookie of the year too. It's amazing.
Dude, he was like the triple-double machine.
I know. It's amazing what bad players can do on bad teams when they have 30% usage, And
I thought he was good at basketball because I think, as you know, and I've talked about before, I do base a lot of my NBA opinions on DFS because I don't actually give a shit about basketball.
Right.
But that's gone away to some extent, as I've been playing NBA DFS for years now. But that first year or two when I was playing, I just thought he was the next superstar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was. Yeah. It certainly seemed like he would at least be competent. Like he would at least be a piece to build around, right? And that has not been the case. All right. One more here I'll ask you about, and then we'll move on. Again, we'll hit on everything more once we get into our shows tomorrow. And I write the deep dive, which is pretty much I'm going to break down everything as in depth as humanly possible. Adam does the same. Justin Holiday, I know. He gets some talk, but this dude, man, like you want to talk about porous per minute production. Justin Holiday is your perfect example. I mean, the guy's playing 38 minutes per game. That's the one reason that you would consider playing him. But his usage rate, I haven't looked. His usage rate has to be around like 14%.
Yeah, that's normally where it is. And yeah, I mean, the minutes are nice. The price tag's nice. He's like the exact kind of guy that if I'm playing 150 lineups, I certainly will have some just because like he can run into points while he's out there. But if I were someone making like 5 to 10 lineups and playing, like the $33 on DraftKings, where I'm looking to get as much upside into these lineups as I can, he's just not a guy that I go to. If he happens to pick up 6 steals or something, then it happens. But he's just not the kind of guy that I would want to throw a spot away on. I'm looking at the rotation from the last Charlotte game.
13% usage, by the way. I was a percent off.
That's ugly. I wanted to say that I thought Chandler Hutchison could be a good, like, if you're going to play a low usage guy, like take the savings and go there, but I'm not confident there because he only played 13 minutes in that game. I could see him getting some extra run though with Parker. With Portis being out, Parker being forced into more minutes. Holiday already was playing a lot. I could see Chandler Hutchison getting some more run.
It's possible. And 39 minutes for Justin Holiday is like, 0.4 fantasy points per minute. So you're not missing much. Power forward, the excellent comp you made was in terms of like real true ceiling to Giannis is Anthony Davis, and it's true because in terms of like with Harden and Curry, and I'll even throw Durant and even Westbrook doesn't really reach that. People are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but with Giannis and Davis, it's just the fact that they can. I guess Westbrook's in there too because he can give you like 18 rebounds and 13 assists and 40 points. But I think the blocks and the steals when it comes to Davis, including everything else, is what puts him on that next level, because when he has that big game, it's 35 points, 16 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, 5 blocks. Like
that's a really good point, and it goes for Giannis too. That's a really, really good point that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does, because a lot of times those are difficult. Like steals can be a difficult stat to predict unless it's guys that just always get their hands in there. But with Davis and Giannis with blocks, they always get them because they just have monster wingspans. They're everywhere. They do everything. And Davis has a matchup against Brooklyn.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, actually, just one thing that I thought of when you were talking, what Giannis reminds me of this year is Russell Westbrook in that year without Durant when he was hurt.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. With more blocks.
Yeah. But
yeah.
just the guy that, like, you didn't want to pay $14,000 for him, but you also didn't want to lose all of your entries, so you kind of had to do it.
Right. If you didn't, you were screwed. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, Davis, absolutely phenomenal as well. For the season, a 30.2% usage rate, 20.3% assist percentage, 19% rebounding percentage. Those are obviously just phenomenal numbers. They're all much lower than Giannis's in each category, but still just, phenomenal numbers. He's averaged 1.6 fantasy points per minute without DeMarcus Cousins on the floor since last season. So far this season, he's averaged 1.8 DraftKings points per minute. And it's a phenomenal spot here against Brooklyn. They do have Rondé Hollis-Jefferson back, who should make their defense better in general, but it's still just a great spot here. A bunch of inefficient shooters for Brooklyn, a good spot for rebounding. It's as good a spot as you can get.
Giannis or Davis? Because honestly, if I'm making, let's say 150, I think I'm splitting them 50-50. I really think that they're so close in this spot. I know
Giannis.
you lean Giannis. I know.
Yeah, I lean Giannis. I do think that if I'm making 150, I'm going to have at least some where I force in both and just hope that I hit on some ceiling games from some 4K guys.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Because, I mean, you could, not easily, but very conceivably pick up 160 points from these two guys.
That would be insane. But I definitely hear what you're saying. And with the thing about Davis here too is that, like, this game is just going to feature a lot of scoring, and the only concern is the blowout. So I think I would lean Giannis there a little bit because that game has there's 1.5 point spread. New Orleans is 9.5 points. But there is a legitimate chance New Orleans can trash Brooklyn. And the same thing goes for Davis, that, like, you have Mirotic and you have Drew Holiday and you have players that will, like, and can average really quality fantasy points per game, but it doesn't stop Davis from doing it because he contributes to their, like, Giannis and Davis contribute to their teammates' good games.
Right, exactly. And actually, as far as the Giannis versus Davis, if I have to pick one, that is a spot, as much as I love Giannis, pay attention to ownership, because you have Giannis coming off an 80-point game. You have blowout concerns for the Pelicans at home against the Nets, which is something that you and I, neither one, put much emphasis on, but we know that other people do. So, I mean, you don't need that much of a split between Giannis and Davis for Davis to be the better play, even if you're fully in love with Giannis, like I think we both are.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point for sure. Both of them to me are the two top plays on the slate, and I feel pretty confident about that. We mentioned Jabari. We mentioned Melo. I'm trying to think of some other power forwards here. It's funny, because of multi-position eligibility, shooting guard had been like the worst position for a long time. It's actually pretty deep now because you have whether it be Oladipo or Kawhi or DeRozan or Levine, or just a lot of guys that fell into better roles and better spots and have multi-position eligibility. But then power forward, there aren't as many good ones anymore.
Yeah, it has been pretty weird this season, and it's like a lot of the good ones are priced. I think what a lot of what it is the good power forwards are priced like at 7,500, and it's not that it's a bad price for them. Like think of Tobias Harris. He can pretty easily go for 40. It's not too expensive for Tobias Harris, but when you compare Tobias Harris to a Victor Oladipo or whoever in like the $7,000 to $8,000 price range at a different position, it just becomes really hard to actually prioritize the power forward.
Right, for sure. Like Marvin Bagley, I think later on in the season we're going to start seeing better production from him, but Bielitsa is siphoning away a lot of that production. It's like that with a lot of these guys. Julius Randle's another guy in New Orleans that you have, like, that you're going to get some production from, but you don't prioritize him. What about Pascal Siakam?
Yeah, I think he's okay. I mean,
He has to fall into a good game is the thing.
yeah, like the price tag's nice. He probably plays around 25 minutes. It's just that it's tough to really get too excited about him. Montrezl Harrell's the cheap guy that I'm really interested in here. He's coming off a monster game against Houston 2 games ago. He had another good game against the Pelicans, and I don't expect him to be sneaky like he was the last time he faced the Rockets when I was able to get him at 3% owned. But you look at the Clippers backcourt and you have Marcin Gortat, who is barely playing minutes. I mean, he's looking at 18 to 22 minutes. And then you have Boban, who they're trying to get minutes for, but you cannot play Boban against PJ Tucker or Julius Randle, which, their last 2 opponents. So you get more minutes from Montrezl Harrell. He's always productive when he plays, and he's still 4,600 on DraftKings. He's, over a point per minute producer and should play somewhere in the range of, at least like 23, 24 minutes.
Yep, I think that's fair. 4,600, not a bad price point whatsoever. All right, let's close it out with the center position. Been a good show so far. For a preliminary show, we're giving you all we can here. I think at 6,700, we'll get into some more expensive guys for sure. And obviously you can play Anthony Davis here. DeAndre's having a solid year with Dallas, and there's a bunch of guys that we'll talk about. But I think if you're playing Chris Paul, Clint Capella does make for a really solid pairing with him. They just have there's strong positive correlation with Capella and Paul or Capella and Harden, especially when one of them is out. And Capella gives you that upside for the 20 points on, 8 putbacks and a couple from 5 to 6 feet out, 10, 12 rebounds. And he's facing a Clippers team that no longer has DeAndre Jordan to protect the rim.
Yeah, for sure. Capella, I don't like him as much with Harden out, though, is the thing. You don't get to pick.
I don't think that it's that much of a – like if Harden was out and Chris Paul wasn't on this team, I would totally agree. But I feel like Chris Paul is just so talented enough as a passer that I don't think it takes away from him as much as if Michael Carter Williams was the one running the point or, Eric Gordon was forced into doing it. I still think that they're able to function pretty nicely together. That's just where I'm at, though.
No, I mean, I agree with you there. I'm trying to pull the stuff up from last year because I think I remember it being a bigger gap than I expected when you had that. So with Paul on and Harden off last year, Capella averaged 1.1 points per minute. He had an 18.1% usage rate. If you flip that, he has, I believe it's like a 22% usage rate going from memory, waiting for this to load. But I think it's big. Yeah. Okay. Only a 20.6% usage rate. So like 1.5% higher.
What about per minute production?
Pulling that up now. Maybe. He's at 1.3 DraftKings points per minute with Harden on and Paul off compared to 1.
So it does make a difference. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Fair point. I still think he's reasonably priced. And I think, look, here's what I'm saying. And I'm glad you pulled that up. I still see there being opportunity here for Capella, though. And Chris, I guess I see it this way, too. Like, if Capella's going to score, let's just say that you have paired the two. If Capella's going to score, Chris Paul's going to be involved, even if it's not as a higher rate as with Harden.
I agree completely. The price tag's still too cheap for, a guy that we would expect to go out there and play around 33 minutes. I agree completely against, Marcin Gortat and Montrezl Harrell.
Dude. Karl Anthony Towns has been a colossal disappointment. I mean, last game was a great opportunity with no who do we have? No Wiggins and Jimmy Butler facing Kawhi Leonard, and he finishes 5 for 17 with 14 points and 8 rebounds.
Yeah, it's just bad. I didn't go back and watch that game, but one of my friends lives up there and was watching it, and he messaged me and he was just like, dude, they're just like hitting Towns constantly, and he just doesn't like play through it. He just goes and disappears.
I feel like he's soft.
Yeah, I don't even think that's an opinion. Like, I think that's just like fact.
Yeah, I think and like defensively, Dude, last year they had the worst rim protection rating in the entire league. A lot of that had to do with Towns. There's no question. I mean, this is not a very good defensive team whatsoever, and Towns is not helping them. That's why we talked about Giannis so much. But I like the reason I bring it up. Towns is down to $8,000, dude, and we both said he's too cheap last time, and he's too cheap against Brook Lopez too, and I'll probably have some interest in him. But man, it's been really, 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 really tough to pull the trigger on Towns right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to the point where you just can't confidently project him at all. It's a pain in the ass because, like, the ceiling, he's still really talented, but you also at some point have to, like, just man up and, like, play basketball and live up to your potential, and he's just not coming close to doing that. So it's almost to the point where, are you costing yourself more money on the 1 or 2 days where he actually does go out there and drop 60 and you don't have him, or by making him a key part of your teams, waiting for that to happen when he just doesn't really appear interested.
You watch like a remotely similar big man with athleticism and Embiid, and how he basically, when he has the ball in the post and he wants to score, he might not make it every time, but he is going to force his way to the bat. He is going to impose every bit of his will upon you.
It's a completely different mindset. It has nothing to do with ability or anything. It's just a mindset.
Exactly. Because in terms of ability, I'd say they're identical. Like not the same skill set entirely, but in terms of ability. But Joel Embiid has a mentality, as you mentioned, where if this dude's scoring, if there's no surprise he has 30 plus points and 10 plus rebounds in 4 straight games. Like, dude, he just gets the job done, and it doesn't matter the matchup. When it comes to Karl-Anthony Towns, even in the good matchups, you have to wonder if he's going to be there. It's crazy, man. And even at 8K, it's like, all right, I might just go down. Like right now, DeAndre Jordan at 7,200, even though he's not even remotely as talented as Towns, is a more reliable fantasy option, and that's not even questionable.
Right. Yeah, reliable, certainly. Like, obviously he doesn't have the ceiling, but
right.
He's a lot of nights he's going to go out there and just put up, 40 points, just like Towns is.
Right, exactly. I mean, to be fair, he's been more consistent with a higher floor than Towns this season.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess on the flip side, though, Towns' price has gotten so cheap. Like, he might be really disappointing, but you're still talking about a guy that is going to go out there and give you at least 35, 40 fantasy points.
And that's why I had to bring him up, because I wouldn't have brought him up at 9K. It would have been a non-starter, right?
Right. And center on this slate really isn't that deep either. Like, you have Capella, but like Enes Kanter, Golden State does just like force him off the floor because they just run pick and roll until he finds his way to the bench.
Yeah.
So that takes him out.
Draymond's been a colossal disappointment.
Right. Yeah. And Draymond's another guy that like he
he's
can
not
go
shooting.
out there. Right. Yeah. So center kind of.
Sorry to interrupt, but have you seen his shot attempts? 3, 4, 4, 12, 6 on the year.
Wow.
Crazy. Go ahead. Center, you said.
Just kind of sucks. Like, you have Wendell Carter as value at the bottom, but that there's not as much opportunity cost. I guess my point is at center as there is on most slates. So going to a guy like Towns, who most likely is going to disappoint you, but does have a ceiling, is more appealing than when you're like, okay, well, I need Towns to hit his ceiling, and I also need these 5 other guys not to score 55 points.
Exactly. You wonder, like, does Wendell Carter benefit from no Bobby Portis?
I would imagine he has to.
See, I was going to say, you have to imagine that he does, but I don't know, because Bobby Portis in his last 2 games attempted 9 and 5 field goals. It's not like he was vacuuming up the boards. Like, and Wendell Carter still really did nothing. Like, I really don't know how much of a difference. I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make. I mean, it really comes down to Wendell Carter is out there, and that's it. He's just out there. He's played 30 plus in 2 straight games. That's nice, right? And it gives you, 21 and a half. Like, okay. But I guess the one thing is, as a center, he's attempted 7 and 7 shots. He's going to have the game where he shoots 6 of 7 and gives you 30 fantasy points. But the truth is, right now with Wendell Carter, we need a highly efficient game to get him where we need to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. But like Portis not being out there, it is some usage. You said he hasn't been shooting a lot lately, which is true. But it's still some. I guess it's not really some usage though when you factor in Jabari Parker's replacing him. But Parker, I think, is less likely to try and rebound at all. So, maybe some more opportunities there for Carter. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. For the most part, it's just that it's a cheap price tag. He is going to play around 30 minutes. He did lose forward eligibility on DraftKings, though, which makes it a little bit harder to get to him.
It does. And he only had it for a day, which also makes virtually no sense at all.
Yeah, him and Doncic.
Let me ask you one more question here before we head out. What are your thoughts? Because I have a few opinions here. What are your thoughts on the Sacramento front court against this Washington team, knowing that, number one, it has the highest total on the game, but number two, knowing that Washington has to go small? I mean, okay, so Jan Mahimi, if he plays, then I guess it changes things up a little bit. But Mahimi's not going to play 30 minutes anyway. Dwight Howard is already ruled out. We know that for a fact. So, like, you're looking at the Jason Smiths of this world, right? You're looking at like maybe a Thomas Bryant for 10 minutes and maybe Morris getting minutes at the 5. So what does that do to the front court in Sacramento, where you have so many names like Willie Cauley-Stein, and obviously the BCA is not a guy you expect to do anything, but Bjelica and Bagley and Harry Giles. There's a lot of names here. I feel like one or two of these guys is going to get a lot of run when this Washington team goes small.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're going to see a lot of Markieff Morris, and you're going to see a lot of Jeff Green at center for Washington. I think Cauley-Stein's athletic enough to stay out there. I'm not concerned about him getting run off, but I think that it does open the door potentially for maybe some more, Marvin Bagley, who this is actually a spot that I think it's interesting because Marvin Bagley was like last slate's Damian Dotson, where people were like chasing points when he played 30 minutes because of a blowout. And then he came out and predictably played 22 minutes and didn't really do anything. But quickly looking at that game log, it looks like we got some lineups with Bagley at the 5 probably. Like,
we did.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, we did. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah. Look,
Harry Giles played no second half minutes, so we did.
Right. Look, Bjelica is 6'10", Marvin Bagley 6'11", 234. Harry Giles is 6'10", 240. These are some big dudes, right? Like, these are all guys these are big enough guys to play the 5, and also, depending on the matchup, to play the 4, which is why I wonder if it even makes a difference. Like, Cauley-Stein 7 foot, but could you see some Bjelica at the 5? Like, is it crazy to think that you'd have like a De'Aaron Fox, Jackson, Buddy Hield? I guess no. I guess it would be like Bjelica at the 4 and then Bagley at the 5. I guess that would be the only way to do it.
So I guess the point, though, is that there's a bunch of bodies here that we can't be confident in, but this is a game where you would expect one of these guys probably to come out and overperform what their salary dictates.
Right. Here's what you could even see like a Fox, Farrell, Yogi Ferrell, Hield, and then who else did I mention? Now I'm drawing a blank. And then like a Bjelica at the 5, depending on how small they go. It's not, or like a Justin Jackson, and it's not crazy to think that they just go super small in some spots, which could be good for maybe Bagley, but could be bad for this entire front court too.
Right.
So yeah. Anyone else here at the position? I think we've hit them.
Jared Allen's looked really good. Probably plays 30 minutes, but. And I think it's a good Jonas game. Like, I would imagine, starts against DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, and Jared Allen has done a really good job of staying out of foul trouble, which would be a very important factor going up against just a lot of really talented offensive bigs in New Orleans. So,
you know what? I just thought about it. Brook Lopez. I mean,
yeah, I was going to mention him as well. If we talk so much shit on Minnesota's front court defense, but Lopez is doing everything from beyond the arc right now. Like, I think against Philly, maybe I'm wrong. Let me look it up. I thought most of his 5 for 11 from 3-point range. He attempted 13 shots.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I like that against Minnesota. under Tibbs for the last couple of years, they struggle against stretch bigs, which Lopez clearly is. Towns is going to be slow closing out on him, or Gibson, whichever one is going to chase him out to the 3-point line. I think it's a spot where Lopez could actually have a pretty big game here.
Yeah, it's very possible. And I think we both said the other day that Brook Lopez, if he gets hot, is going to play 30-plus minutes, and he did in 2 straight games. That's nice to see. There's no reason he shouldn't be. I'm a fan of Henson in a limited capacity, but Lopez is the guy you want out there right now. They have solid enough perimeter defense and Giannis to get there around the rim that Brook Lopez is not enough. He's actually not the worst defender either. He's just not good at rebounding because he doesn't care about it.
Right.
Which helps Giannis even more.
Yep.
So, yeah, good call on that 4,800. I think that'll do it. Long podcast, but certainly a good one. This is the DFS Early Bird with Adam Shar and myself, Dave Lockard. Follow him at ShipMyMoneyDFS, myself at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. If you have any questions about our process, too, any of the stats we talk about, we're happy to give you information on where to find all of that as well. And you can catch my deep dive today, Friday. Adam and I rotate days, and then you can find us Monday through Friday on the deeper dive at 5 p.m., which is where we really dig into it. Thanks, as always, for listening. We'll catch you back here on the next edition of the DFS Early Bird.